God is my witness. As God is my witness, they're not going to lick me. I'm going to live through this, and when it's all over, I'll never be hungry again. No, nor any of my folk. If I had to lie, steal, cheat, or kill, as God is my witness, I'll never be hungry again.
Hi, this is Dan. Today, let's talk a little bit more about character development in our ongoing series, Backward Engineering Your Script. Let's talk primarily about what it takes to make a great character. There's many elements that go into making a great character, and as always, I'm going to use a lot of stuff from Hollywood's past. And you might ask, why are you using Hollywood's past instead of talking about things that are new? Because I feel that a lot of times, a lot of the cinematic education of people who are trying to break into the business isn't what it could be. Not necessarily a complaint, just an observation. And what this means is that there's a lot of things from the past that were core to successful movie making as well as TV shows. And to ignore a lot of the prototypes is to have to reinvent the wheel. So I like to talk about things that are not reinventing the wheel, but are the actual foundational elements that have led to the successful industry as it is today. Well, maybe not as it is at this particular moment, but ways in which we can go back to that. And since I've already disclosed that I'm going to talk about characters who are from older movies, I'm going to take this one step further and talk about an extremely controversial character and why, in spite of the controversial elements of this character, it is still an ideal role model for anyone who wants to do something that's a popular art form, has had incredible long-term success, and in turn has led to a lot of future movies that have been in one way or another based on this character or their types. Now, with that disclosure in mind, let's talk about the character of Scarlett O'Hara in Gone with the Wind. And this is looking at Scarlett O'Hara separate and apart from the controversies of the novel, of the movie, and especially of the mythology that has been built up about it, both positive and negative, with a complete disregard of the facts of its actual production, especially in terms of the involvement or lack thereof of the NAACP in its original adaptation, a lot of the compromises that were made at that time, and especially if you compare it with other movies that had similar themes and similar type characters in the same era. It was, in fact, a very, very progressive movie for the time. That does not mean it looks progressive at all today, but it was in 1939. So let's look at Scarlett O'Hara, because Scarlett O'Hara is a character that has a lot of complexity to her. And within that complexity, we see what makes an ideal character. Now, why is Scarlett O'Hara an ideal character? She is role modeling. And she's role modeling for reasons that are almost difficult to fathom, because she has a surface that's so toxic and so negative that we look at her and think, how could she be in any way a role modeling character? And that's the point. Just like if you look at some of the great movies of the 70s where moral ambiguity was the key, we saw morally ambiguous characters, such as in the movie Clute, such as in the movie MASH, such as in most Robert Altman movies, such as in most Hal Ashby movies, such as in most Robert Towne movies. Robert Towne, who recently died. Look at something like Chinatown. It posits a world where there isn't even the possibility of the happy ending, and where the evil guy not only gets rid of the only real witness to his evil, but he's carrying it on into another generation. It's about just unmitigated evil all over the place. So, probably that's why Chinatown was a box office disappointment at this time. It's considered one of the greatest movies of all time. It was knocked out of Best Picture by Godfather Part 2, which is another greatest movie of all time. But its lack of box office acumen was because it was so overwhelmingly negative. It is considered one of the great classics today. So let's bring that back to Scarlett O'Hara. What is the surface of Scarlett O'Hara that's a negative that makes her role modeling not seem ridiculous and saint-like? The main challenge in Gone with the Wind is that Scarlett O'Hara is presented as someone who is pretty, superficial, wanton, flirtatious, impulsive, and actually spends most of the story chasing after a gay guy who's married to another woman. And in fact, I don't know if these are turkey baster for this or not, but they somehow managed to have a kid. So it's one of those movies that and stories that has a lot of really ambiguous elements. Those surface characteristics in Scarlett O'Hara cover the fact that she has incredible strength, and that when push comes to shove, when the going gets tough, she does miraculous things. She and the character Prissy, on being told that the doctor is at the station taking care of wounded people, cannot help to deliver a baby, both women with no experience at all are able to deliver a healthy baby, and the mother survives. And this is all happening while Atlanta is collapsing around them. So they're under a lot of tension. And in fact, because of this, because Scarlett understands that she and Prissy have done this, and yes, she was momentarily mad at Prissy because Prissy saying she knew everything about helping with childbirth and she actually didn't, was a reminder to Scarlett that she always lies and she's never had to face the consequence for a lie. Well, now she has to face one, and she and Prissy have to make it happen. And guess what they do? So you'll notice that from then on, Scarlett has respect for Prissy. Even at the end of the movie, when she's going to Atlanta, she brings Mammy, she brings Pork, both of whom we see later in much greater clothing and all that. So it's clear that Scarlett rewards people and is very loyal to those who help her, regardless of race. And she brings Prissy because she don't want Prissy stuck with her two annoying sisters. She knows she and Prissy were important to each other. They learned from each other. And they were both in a terribly stressful situation, and they survived it. So she does that. When a Yankee renegade comes by, she shoots him as he's trying to steal her stuff. And then she buries his body with the help of Melanie. Now note that Melanie is depicted as being this milquetoast, plain woman. But every single thing she does shows that she has the same strength and stamina of Scarlett. Now, Scarlett tends to make fun of her, but Scarlett respects her, and Melanie respects Scarlett back. When Scarlett is caught with Ashley in a friendly embrace that's misinterpreted by their, really jealous and vindictive sister-in-law and a gossiping neighbor, Melanie kicks her sister-in-law and the neighbor out because she supports Scarlett. She trusts her. Melanie has real strength. She's willing to try to help Scarlett bury the body. She has no moral compunction. Scarlett realizes that. She's jealous of Melanie because Melanie has Ashley. But Scarlett's mistaken for going after Ashley for reasons that are worthy of discussion as well. But she is willing to become a prostitute. She's willing to sleep with Rhett in order to get the money to save the house. Now, that might sound selfish, but remember, without that house, she, the servants, and NAACP compromised, by the way. They weren't going to use the word slave, especially when they were talking to the characters. Scarlett and Ashley talk about slave. You weren't troubled about thinking about owning slaves, Scarlett says to Ashley. Note she said that. She's calling him on his BS. We see her saving the family. She's willing to try to save the family. Rhett doesn't have the money. So she ends up marrying a man she doesn't love, who in fact was her sister's boyfriend. Another seemingly selfish act. But at the end of the day, she makes the guy successful. She helps him take his lumber business, which was entrepreneurial, but wasn't really that successful. And she's able to turn it into one of the main finance centers in Atlanta. So she actually doesn't need Rhett Butler's money. She has learned how to make her own. Yes, she's abusing Frank. And so that's what makes her complicated. But it took people like that to fight the carpetbaggers, to fight the corruption that was going on in the cities, and to say, I'm going to make this happen anyway, because she doesn't ever want to be hungry again. So we see her doing all of this stuff. And yes, she's a complicated character, but people have loved her. Why? Because when the book came out during the Depression, people knew what it was like to go from being fabulously wealthy to having nothing overnight. And here was a character who went from having everything to having nothing overnight. And she did not let it stop her. She still had pettiness. She still had jealousy. She still had all sorts of negative traits to her. But at the end of the day, she ends up absolutely being a rainmaker, making things happen, saving people's lives, helpfully saving the town. When she marries Rhett, she also strikes a big blow for pre-feminism. Because what's the truth about Rhett Butler? Rhett Butler's a weak man. He pretends he's strong. He's every bit as much of a moonlight and magnolia's phony as Ashley is. And what does Rhett do? He's a blockader. He keeps saying that he can do all this stuff. But when push comes to shove, when the going gets tough, Rhett gets gone. He doesn't help. After Atlanta collapses, he leaves Scarlett on the road to Tara. He's needed to help in case her farm is burned down. They need his help in case there's disaster that's facing. How are they going to make money? How are they going to keep food on the table? No, he runs off for some glorious metaphysical thing. So he ran away then. Later on, when Scarlett comes to him and wants to get the money, he doesn't have it. So once again, he lets her down. Then when they get married and they're having and then they have their kid, when Scarlett says she doesn't want to sleep with him anymore because she's afraid of getting fat, and then she's still into Ashley, he doesn't handle that well. He goes and hangs out with his prostitute girlfriend who he already has a son with. So he's kind of a loser guy. Don't think he's a hero. And after he takes her upstairs that night, where a lot of people misinterpret that as a rape, but in the morning you see she had a good time, he's afraid of her. She's really laid it on him, and he can't handle it. That she's much more of a sexual dynamo than he is. In 1939, you couldn't say that, but it's clear that that's what happened. So what does he do? He steals their daughter and runs away to England. So every single time when there's something bad that he is needed to fill in a classical macho 1930s male thing, he fails. The end of the movie, he decides to leave her. Why? Because now he actually has her. Now she's actually ready to kind of settle down with him, although I don't think she would have ever been satisfied with him. But his curtain line is not...
Frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn.
His curtain line is, I'm going back to Charleston, back to a life of charm and grace. He's been mocking those sentiments for the entire movie. So at the end, Scarlett O'Hara, been through a little bit of an emotional mill. She's protected her house. She's saved people's lives. She's proven that women can do something that men can't do. She's put up with 3 weakling husbands. And at the end, she owns 2 houses outright. She has loyal support with Mammy, Prissy, and Pork, and I expect that they're going to actually leave Atlanta and go out west and become, huge multimillionaires. I think Atlanta's going to be boring for them. And you end up having the ending when she says, I'll think of some way to get him back. After all, tomorrow's another day. Truth is, she doesn't need him. The truth is, she's independent. She's been completely decimated, and she's come back. That is the definition of a great character. And had she not had her flaws, she would have just been another instead of one of the great heroines.